The blood eagle hung heavy in the autumn sky above the gathering at the Thing. Asmund Wolfson stood with his men, his hand resting on the pommel of his sword as the assembly called for judgment. The circle of grim-faced warriors parted as the body of his father was carried forth on a wooden shield. Ragnar Wolfson, once the mightiest jarl of the northern fjords, now lay pale and still, his beard braided for his journey to Valhalla. "My father's killer shall not see another winter," Asmund declared, his voice carrying across the assembly grounds. The gathered warriors pounded their shields in approval, the sound like distant thunder rolling across the valley. Asmund had lived by a simple truth since boyhood: blood demanded blood. The gods wove this certainty into the very fabric of a warrior's honor. His father's death at the hands of Leif Lindason had sealed the fate of that entire bloodline. There could be no peace between their families, only the satisfaction of vengeance or the shame of failure. As the assembly dispersed, his uncle Bjorn approached, grey beard fluttering in the coastal wind. "Your father would be proud. You speak with the voice of a jarl now." "I speak with the voice of vengeance," Asmund replied, watching the horizon where Lindason's lands lay beyond the fjord. "When the snows melt, we sail for their settlement. Every man, woman, and child of their bloodline will know our wrath." That night, as his men celebrated with mead and boasts of the coming raid, Asmund sat alone by the hearth in his father's, now his, great hall. The flames cast dancing shadows across the carved wooden pillars depicting Odin's ravens and Thor's mighty hammer. He turned his father's arm ring in his hands, the gold still warm as though it carried Ragnar's spirit. "Your death will be answered," he whispered to the flames. "This I swear by the All-Father's eye." When spring came, Asmund led 3 longships across the sea toward the Lindason settlement. The sea spirits favored their journey with swift winds and calm waters, surely a sign the gods approved of their vengeance. As they neared the shore, Asmund stood at the prow, his crimson cloak whipping behind him, axe gleaming in the morning sun. "No prisoners," he commanded as the keel ground against the pebbly shore. "Except Leif Lindason. He belongs to me." His warriors poured forth from the ships like wolves upon a wounded deer. The settlement had little warning, only the frantic ringing of a warning bell before Asmund's men were among them, steel flashing in the morning light. The Wolfson warriors moved with disciplined fury, burning homes and cutting down any who stood against them. Asmund cut his way toward the great hall at the settlement center. There, he expected to find Leif Lindason cowering. Instead, as he kicked open the heavy oak door, he found himself facing not Leif, but a shield maiden with fierce eyes and hair the color of flame. She stood before him, sword drawn, wearing a mail shirt over her blue linen dress. Behind her, children huddled in fear. "If you seek my father, you sail too late," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Odin claimed him 3 days past." Asmund lowered his axe a fraction. "You are Lindason's daughter." "I am Freydis Lindason," she replied, chin raised in defiance. "And you murder innocents for nothing. My father died of fever, not in glory. Your vengeance finds no worthy target here." A strange unease settled in Asmund's chest. The death of Leif by illness rather than his blade robbed him of the satisfaction he had craved through the long winter nights. Yet here stood Leif's blood, defiant and unafraid. "Your father slew mine through treachery," Asmund growled. "His blood debt passes to his kin." "There was no treachery," Freydis countered. "They met in honorable combat at the stream border. All who witnessed it know this truth." Asmund circled her, noting the steady way she tracked his movement, her grip on her sword practiced and sure. "Your father's death leaves you as head of your household." "It does." A plan formed in Asmund's mind. The gods had denied him Leif's blood, but perhaps they offered something more valuable, control of Lindason lands through marriage. "Then hear me, daughter of Lindason. I will spare your settlement and these children if you agree to be my bride. Our union will end this blood feud and join our lands." Freydis's green eyes flashed with fury. "I would rather join my father in death than share your hearth, son of Wolfson." Asmund had never been refused anything, certainly not by a woman whose settlement lay at his mercy. "You have until the moon rises to reconsider. When I return, you will give me your answer, or I will burn what remains of your father's legacy to ash." He left her standing amid the frightened children, their wide eyes following him as he stepped back into the sunlight where his men continued their raid. As dusk approached, Bjorn found Asmund staring out at the fjord. "The men have gathered all valuables and taken 20 thralls. Shall we put the settlement to the torch?" Asmund watched the last light of day shimmer on the water. "Not yet. I have offered terms to Lindason's daughter." Bjorn's bushy eyebrows rose. "What terms could you offer a defeated enemy?" "Marriage. The joining of our bloodlines would end this feud and double our holdings." His uncle stroked his beard thoughtfully. "She is known to be as fierce as she is fair. Her father trained her in the ways of the shield rather than the loom. The settlement would be a valuable prize." When the moon rose, Asmund returned to the great hall. Freydis stood where he had left her, though the children were gone. "Have you reconsidered my offer?" he demanded. "I have," Freydis replied. "And my answer remains the same. I will not be your bride, taken through violence and coercion." Asmund felt his patience fraying. "You would condemn your people to death over your pride." "My people are already safe," she said with the hint of a smile. "While you waited, they took to the hidden paths through the mountains. By now, they have reached my mother's kin across the ridge. Burn what you wish, you burn only wood and stone, not our spirit." Rage flared in Asmund's chest. He had been outmaneuvered by this woman while he contemplated his vengeance. "Then you shall come as my thrall rather than my bride." "I think not." With a swift motion, Freydis overturned a nearby brazier. Flames licked up the wall hangings with startling speed, and in the confusion, she slipped past him through a hidden door in the wall. By the time Asmund escaped the rapidly burning hall, Freydis had disappeared into the darkness beyond the settlement. He ordered his men to hunt her down, but after hours of searching the dense forest and rocky shoreline, they returned empty-handed. "She knows these lands better than we do," Bjorn observed. "We could search for days and not find her." Asmund stared at the burning settlement, his vengeance incomplete, his pride wounded. "Take what we've gathered." We returned to our shores. During the voyage home, Asmund could not shake the memory of Freydis's defiant green eyes. No woman had ever stood against him thus. No enemy had ever outwitted him with such calm precision. The thought plagued him through the summer months as he managed his lands and settled disputes among his people. At night, he dreamt of flame-colored hair and a voice that showed no fear. The summer gave way to harvest, and still, Leif Lindason haunted his thoughts. One evening, as Asmund sat in his high seat overseeing a feast, the skald Thorstein sang a tale of a shield maiden who outsmarted a berserker king. "Your thoughts drift across the water," Bjorn observed, taking the seat beside him. "To the daughter of Lindason." Asmund took a long drink of mead. "She made me look a fool." "She showed courage and cunning," Bjorn replied. "Rare qualities, even among our own women." "She refused to be my bride." "She refused to be conquered," Bjorn corrected. "There is a difference." Perhaps if you had approached with honor rather than fire, her answer might have differed. The word struck Asmund like a blow. He had never considered offering peace first. The feud between their families had existed since before his birth, a hatred inherited like his father's arm rings and lands. "What would you have me do?" crawl back to her lands and beg forgiveness. Bjorn's weathered face broke into a rare smile. The son of Ragnar Wolfson does not beg. But he might offer proper bride price and courtship if he truly desires to end a blood feud through marriage. The idea took root in Asmund's mind. If he could win Freydis through honorable means, he would gain both her lands and, more importantly, restore the honor that her escape had tarnished. When the first snow fell, Asmund called his shipwright. "Prepare my finest vessel for spring sailing. We journey again to Lindason lands." Throughout the winter, Asmund prepared. He commissioned a bride gift worthy of a jarl's daughter, a necklace of silver and amber crafted by the finest silversmith in the settlement. He studied the proper customs of courtship, the formal words of proposal, the appropriate bride price for a woman of Freydis' standing. When his men learned they would return to Lindason territory, many assumed it would be to complete their interrupted vengeance. Asmund gathered them in the great hall to explain. "We sail not for vengeance but for alliance," he declared, his voice echoing off the timber walls. "The daughter of Lindason is worthy of honor, and I intend to offer her proper courtship." Murmurs spread through the gathering until Thorvald, one of his most trusted warriors, spoke. "You would marry the daughter of the man who killed your father?" "My father died in honorable combat," Asmund replied, the words feeling strange on his tongue. "Or so she claims. I intend to learn the truth and, if she speaks honestly, end our blood feud through marriage bonds rather than more bloodshed." Not all were convinced, but none dared challenge their jarl openly. As the ice broke on the fjord, Asmund's ship was prepared, not with shields along the gunwales as for a raid, but decorated with carved dragon heads freshly painted and banners proclaiming his lineage. They sailed with the spring tides, navigating the familiar waters with practiced ease. As they approached the Lindason settlement, Asmund ordered his men to remain on the ship while he went ashore alone, carrying only a small eating knife to show his peaceful intentions. The settlement had been rebuilt after the fire, though the new structures lacked the grandeur of those they had replaced. Villagers stopped their work to stare as Asmund walked the central path, his crimson cloak billowing behind him, his hands empty of weapons. At the new great hall, smaller than the one that had burned, 2 guards crossed their spears to block his entrance. "I come in peace," Asmund announced. "I seek audience with Freydis Lindason." After a tense moment, the guards parted, and Asmund entered the smoky interior. There, seated in the high seat that had once belonged to her father, sat Freydis. Her red hair was elaborately braided, and she wore a blue apron dress adorned with bronze brooches over her linen shift. Around her neck hung her father's arm ring, too large for her wrist but a symbol of her authority nonetheless. "The wolf returns to the fold," she said, her voice carrying across the hall. "Have you brought fire again, Asmund Wolfson?" Asmund approached until he stood before her, then, to the gasps of those present, knelt on one knee. "I come alone and unarmed, Freydis Lindason. I seek to make amends." Suspicion clouded her features. "What amends can there be for burning homes and terrorizing children?" "I offer weregild for the damage my raid caused," he replied. "And I come with a proposal." Freydis leaned forward, her green eyes narrowing. "What proposal could possibly interest me?" "The same I offered before, but now with proper honor," Asmund said. "I wish to court you as befits a jarl's daughter. A formal union of our bloodlines to end the feud between our families." Laughter burst from Freydis, startling Asmund. "You burn my settlement, threaten my people, attempt to take me as thrall when I refuse you, and now return expecting me to consider your suit." She shook her head. "Your arrogance knows no bounds, son of Wolfson." Asmund felt the sting of her words but held his ground. "I have come to learn the truth of my father's death. If, as you claim, he died in honorable combat with your father, then our blood feud has been satisfied according to the old ways. Ask any who witnessed their combat, she replied. They met at the boundary stream as agreed, with equal weapons and no treachery. The gods favored my father that day, though his wounds eventually took him to Valhalla as well. Asmund rose to his feet. Then I ask formal permission to court you, Freydis Lindason. I will return in 1 month with proper bride gifts and witnesses to speak my intentions before your people. Freydis studied him for a long moment, the hall silent around them. Finally, she said, You may return, Asmund Wolfson. I make no promises beyond hearing your words when you do. It was less than he had hoped for but more than he deserved. Asmund bowed his head in acknowledgement and departed, feeling her eyes on his back until he passed through the doorway. When he returned to his ship, Bjorn awaited him. Did she accept your proposal? She agreed to hear me when I return with proper gifts, Asmund replied, watching the settlement grow smaller as they rowed away. It is a beginning. Over the next weeks, Asmund threw himself into preparations. He commissioned the finest craftsmen to create gifts worthy of a Jarl's daughter. He sent messengers to verify Freydis's account of his father's death, and each returned with the same story: the combat had been fair, witnessed by men of honor from both sides. The truth unsettled him. For years, he had nurtured his hatred with the belief that his father had been slain through treachery. The knowledge that Ragnar had died honorably in fair combat left Asmund adrift, questioning the foundation of the blood feud that had defined his life. When the appointed time came, Asmund sailed again to Lindason lands, this time with a ship laden with gifts, silver, fine cloth from distant trading posts, a saddle adorned with intricate leatherwork for Freydis's horse, and most importantly, the bride price, 20 head of cattle, land bordering both their territories, and a chest of silver coins. The Lindason settlement received him with cautious formality. In the month since his last visit, word had spread of the Wolfson Jarl's unexpected courtship. Curious eyes followed him as he processed to the great hall, his gifts carried by his men. Freydis awaited him, dressed in her finest garments, her father's sword at her hip, a clear reminder that she remained a shield maiden despite the occasion. Beside her stood an older woman with the same flame-colored hair, though streaked with silver, her mother, Asmund presumed. Following proper custom, Asmund presented his intentions and gifts before the assembled witnesses. He spoke the formal words of proposal, offering alliance and peace between their families, promising to honor her position and respect her people. When he finished, Freydis regarded the gathered gifts with a measured expression. You offer rich bride price, Asmund Wolfson, but you have not addressed the blood between us. I have spoken with those who witnessed our father's combat, Asmund replied. They confirm your words, it was an honorable duel with no treachery. By our laws and customs, the blood feud ended there, though I was too blinded by grief to see it. Freydis nodded slowly. And what of my refusal when we first met? Would you have taken me unwilling had I not escaped? The question struck at Asmund's pride, but he recognized its importance. I came as a raider then, thinking only of conquest and vengeance. I return now as a suitor, seeking alliance through honor rather than force. If you refuse me today, I will depart in peace, though my heart would remain here. Murmurs rippled through the hall at this admission. Freydis stood from her high seat and approached him, studying his face as though searching for deceit. You speak well, son of Wolfson, but words are wind. How do I know your heart has truly changed? Asmund reached slowly into his belt pouch and withdrew his father's arm ring. This has been worn by the Jarls of my line for 5 generations. I offer it not as bride price but as pledge of my sincerity. Keep it until you decide whether to accept my suit. If you refuse me, return it when next we meet at the Thing. If you accept, place it upon my arm at our handfasting. Freydis took the golden band, her fingers brushing his. A significant pledge. Very well, Asmund Wolfson. I will consider your proposal. Return at midsummer for my answer." It was neither acceptance nor rejection, but Asmund felt a strange lightness as he departed the settlement. For the first time since his father's death, the weight of vengeance no longer pressed upon his shoulders. The weeks until midsummer passed slowly. Asmund attended to his duties as Jarl, settling disputes among his people, overseeing planting, and leading a small trading expedition to the eastern shores. But his thoughts constantly returned to Freydis, her fierce independence, her clever mind, the way sunlight caught in her copper hair. When midsummer approached, a messenger arrived from Lindason lands, bearing an unexpected invitation. The Lindason settlement would host a feast to honor the god's blessing of summer bounty. Asmund and a small party of his choosing were invited to attend. "It seems the Shield Maiden has not dismissed your suit," Bjorn observed as they prepared for the journey. Asmund secured his ceremonial sword belt. "Or she wishes to reject me publicly at her midsummer feast." "Either way," Bjorn replied with a smile, "it will make for a memorable saga." The Lindason settlement was transformed when they arrived. Garlands of flowers adorned the buildings, tables had been set in the central square, and the scent of roasting meat filled the air. Men and women from surrounding homesteads had gathered for the celebration, creating a festive atmosphere that contrasted sharply with Asmund's last visit. Freydis greeted them at the entrance to the settlement, dressed in a green linen dress with her red hair loose around her shoulders, adorned only with a simple circlet of summer flowers. For a moment, Asmund forgot the formal words of greeting he had practiced. "Welcome, Asmund Wolfson," she said, her voice carrying to those nearby. "You and your men are honored guests at our midsummer feast." Throughout the evening, Asmund observed Freydis as she moved among her people with easy confidence. She settled a dispute between farmers with firm fairness, honored an elder's rambling story with genuine attention, and led the first dance around the bonfire with graceful steps. As the night deepened and the mead flowed freely, she finally approached where Asmund sat. "Walk with me," she said, not a request but a command. They strolled beyond the firelight to a cliff overlooking the fjord, where the midsummer sky held only the barest hint of darkness. Below, the water reflected the stars like scattered silver. "I have spoken with the witnesses to my father's final battle with yours," Freydis said without preamble. "Something they told me troubles me." Asmund tensed. "What is that?" "They say your father smiled as he fell. That with his dying breath, he declared it a good death." She turned to face him. Why would a man smile at his death if he believed his killer had acted dishonorably? The question struck Asmund like a physical blow. He had never considered this perspective. "My father valued an honorable death above all else," he admitted slowly. To fall in fair combat would have pleased him more than dying old in his bed. Freydis nodded. "As did mine. They were not so different, our fathers. Both proud, both bound by the old codes." She reached into a small pouch at her belt and withdrew Asmund's arm ring. "I have made my decision regarding your proposal." Asmund's heart quickened. "And what say you, Freydis Lindason?" "I say that I will not be your bride." The words landed like stones in Asmund's chest. He reached for the arm ring she offered, but she closed her hand around it. "I will not be your bride," she continued, taken through arrangement without knowing the man I would bind my life to. "But I am willing to allow you to court me properly, as a man courts a woman, not as a jarl claims a prize." Hope flickered in Asmund's heart. What would such courtship entail? Remain here until the harvest. Work alongside my people. Learn our ways as I learn yours. Prove that you can be more than a raider and avenger. She met his gaze steadily. "Show me the man behind the jarl's mask, Asmund Wolfson, and perhaps then I will consider placing this ring upon your arm." It was not the answer he had anticipated. To remain in Lindason territory for a full season, away from his own responsibilities and people, seemed impossible. Yet as he looked at Freydis in the ghostly midsummer light, he realized he would accept far more difficult terms for the chance to win her. "I will stay," he agreed. "And I will show you who I truly am, beyond blood feuds and inheritance." The harvest season brought new challenges for Asmund. Accustomed to commanding, he now found himself following Freydis's lead, learning the particular ways of Lindason lands. He joined fishing expeditions, helped repair storm damage to the settlement's protective wall, and even assisted with the grain harvest, his hands blistering from work they had never before performed. The Lindason people regarded him warily at first, but as weeks passed, their suspicion gradually gave way to cautious acceptance. Children who had once hidden from him now raced to show him interesting stones or insects they had discovered. Elders who had initially turned their backs when he approached now included him in their evening tales around the fire. Through it all, Freydis watched him, his interactions with her people, his willingness to learn tasks beneath a Jarl's dignity, his growing ease in their community. Sometimes Asmund would catch her observing him with a thoughtful expression that made his heart race faster than any battle ever had. They spoke often, usually as they walked along the shoreline in the evenings after the day's work was done. Asmund learned of her childhood, how her father had trained her with shield and sword after her brother died of fever, how she had fought alongside men in defense of their settlement during a raid 3 winters past. In turn, he shared stories of his own youth, his father's stern lessons, his mother's gentle guidance before she passed to Freya's hall, his first raid at 15 summers, his hopes for his people beyond mere survival. "You speak of your people with true care," Freydis observed one evening as they watched the sunset paint the fjord in crimson and gold. "Not just as a Jarl's possessions but as a family." "They are my responsibility," Asmund replied. "Their well-being rests in my hands." "As mine do in my hands," she said. "Which is why I could never accept a union that might harm them." Asmund turned to face her. "Do you still believe I would bring harm to your people?" Freydis considered him, her green eyes reflecting the dying sunlight. "I believe you have changed since you first came to our shores with fire and sword. But change must be tested to prove its strength." As if the gods heard her words, that test came sooner than either expected. A week before the harvest festival, lookouts spotted 3 ships approaching, raiders from the southern islands who had attacked coastal settlements throughout the summer. The Lindason settlement prepared for defense, warriors taking positions along the walls, women and children gathering in the great hall for safety. Asmund joined Freydis as she organized her fighters, distributing weapons and assigning positions. "Your ship is fastest," she said as they watched the approaching vessels. "You could sail now and be safely away before they reach shore." Asmund looked at her in surprise. "You think I would abandon you to face raiders alone?" "It is not your fight," she replied. "These are not your people." Asmund took her hand, an unprecedented intimacy between them. "They became my people the day I asked to join our bloodlines. I stand with you, Freydis Lindason." The raiders came with the rising tide, their ships grinding onto the pebbly shore as warriors poured forth with axes and swords gleaming. They expected an easy target, a settlement weakened by previous attacks and the loss of its Jarl. Instead, they met a unified defense led by a shield maiden and a northern Jarl fighting side by side. Asmund and Freydis moved together as though they had trained together for years, each anticipating the other's movements, protecting each other's flanks. Where Asmund brought raw power and battle experience, Freydis contributed speed and uncanny precision. Together, they rallied the Lindason warriors to hold the line against the superior numbers of the raiders. The battle raged from midday into dusk. Asmund took a spear thrust to his shoulder that would have struck Freydis's back had he not stepped between them. Despite the wound, he continued fighting until the raiders, faced with unexpected resistance and mounting losses, retreated to their ships. As the raiders' sails disappeared into the gathering darkness, the Lindason people raised a victory cheer that echoed across the fjord. Freydis found Asmund sitting on a rock while a healer tended his shoulder wound. "You bled for my people today," she said, kneeling beside him. Asmund winced as the healer applied a poultice to the wound. "I fought alongside them, as any man would defend his home." "You called this your home," Freydis noted, a small smile playing at her lips. "It has become so," he admitted. "More than I expected when I agreed to stay until harvest." The healer finished binding his wound and departed, leaving them alone in the growing darkness. "The harvest festival is in 7 days, Freydis said after a moment of silence. "After that, you would be free to return to your own lands, according to our agreement." Asmund studied her face, trying to read her thoughts. "Is that what you wish? For me to leave after the festival?" Instead of answering, Freydis reached into her belt pouch and withdrew his father's arm ring. She held it in her palm, the gold gleaming in the torchlight. "When you first came to our shores, I saw only the son of my father's enemy, a man of violence and vengeance," she said softly. "The man before me now has proven to be something else entirely." Asmund hardly dared breathe as she took his right arm and, with deliberate slowness, slid the golden band over his wrist. "I will be your bride, Asmund Wolfson," she declared. "Not because our bloodline should join or because it ends a feud, but because you have shown me your true heart, and it is worthy of mine." Joy surged through Asmund like battle fever. "Do you mean this truly?" "I do not speak words I do not mean," Freydis replied with a smile. "But know this, I remain Freydis Lindason, and I will rule alongside you as equal, not beneath you as subject." Asmund laughed, the sound surprising them both. "I would expect nothing less from the woman who refused me when I came with fire and sword, only to accept me when I came with open hands and humility." The harvest festival became a handfasting celebration. Under an arch woven with autumn flowers and wheat sheaves, before the assembled people of both Lindason and Wolfson settlements, Asmund and Freydis bound their hands with a cloth woven with threads from both their cloaks. The Skald Torstein composed a new saga to mark the occasion, not of blood, feud and vengeance, but of a shield maiden who refused a conqueror only to accept a partner, and of a warrior who learned that true strength lay not in domination but in standing beside one worthy of honor. As winter approached, Asmund and Freydis traveled between their settlements, beginning the work of uniting their people as they had united their lives. Where once blood and hatred had divided the fjord, now bonds of family and alliance grew strong. On midwinter night, as they sat together in what had once been Ragnar Wolfson's high seat, Freydis took Asmund's hand and placed it over her belly. "The gods have blessed our union," she said, her eyes bright in the firelight. "By midsummer, a child of both our bloodlines will join us." Asmund felt wonder replace the last lingering shadows of his old hatred. Where once he had sought only to avenge his father's death, now he prepared to welcome new life, a child who would inherit not a blood feud, but a legacy of peace hard-won through understanding and love. "Our fathers smile in Valhalla tonight," he said, drawing Freydis close. "For their children have found in love what they could not find in battle." Outside, the winter winds howled across the fjord, but within the great hall, surrounded by their people, Asmund and Freydis had created something stronger than vengeance, more lasting than conquest, a bond forged not through force, but through the steady flame of a love that had overcome the ancient hatreds of their blood.